Hi, this is Julie Harland, and I'm your math gal. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com where you could search for any of my videos organized by topic. This is part 12 of ellipses, and we do the following two problems on this video. All right, we're going to do this problem. Find the equation of an ellipse if the foci are at 5, 2, and negative 1, 2, and the length of the major axis is 8. And then graph the ellipse. All right, so we know the foci are at 5, 2, and negative 1, 2. So let's see where those are. So if we go over 5, 2, 1, 2, we go up 2. That's one of the foci. And I'll call that foci 1. And we have another one at negative 1, 2. Then I know that the major axis is right here. I'm going to dot it, by the way. Oops, my dots aren't working out here. All right, anyway, it's this horizontal line at y equals 2. So we know that the center is right between the two foci. So we could take the average to get the values of x, but this is pretty simple. We know it's along this same line, and it's actually right here. If you weren't sure, you could take the average of the two x coordinates, 5 plus negative 1 over 2, and that'll give you your x coordinate, which is 2. So notice the center is at 2, 2. So that's my center. It's right between the two foci. So that's the first thing we notice. So if I'm going to write the equation, I know it's going to be x minus 2 squared over something plus y minus 2 squared over something equals 1. So I'm partially there, right? But we have to figure out a few more things. We know the length of the major axis is 8, and we know that along here is the major axis, right? So if the whole length of the axis is 8, then from the center I need to go 4 to the right and 4 to the left, and that'll give me my vertices. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's one vertex, and the other way is this other vertex. Since I'm going to have to graph it, that's why I put it there. And then I also know that if that's an 8, right, that's on the x-axis, this is going to be where the 4 squared goes, right? 4 to the right, 4 to the left, 4 squared. All right, now we have to pay attention to this foci. How far is the foci from the center? That's your value of c. So this is 3 from the center. So c is 3. So c squared is 9. And the formula to figure out this other thing, let's say I'm going to call this b squared, is, remember, c squared equals a squared minus b squared. It's going to be the bigger number minus the smaller number. Now, how do I know that this is going to be the bigger number? Because this is a horizontal ellipse. So I've got c squared, which is 9, equals a squared, which is 16, minus b squared. So we need to solve that equation. So I'm just going to add b squared to both sides and subtract 9 from both sides. And b will be, well, that's all I need to know. I just have to know what b squared is. So I can now replace this b squared with 7. Same thing here. Instead of writing 4 squared, how about I just write 16? So we're done with the equation. We have the equation. So now to graph it, we're really close to graphing it as well, because all I needed were the vertices from the center, and this is going to be square root of 7 in both directions. So we're going to have to approximate that. Square root of 7 is, in between 2 and 3, right? Because the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 9 is 3. So I know about 2.5. How about we go up about 2.5? And down 2.5. And now we just sketch our ellipse. So I've sketched in, approximately what the ellipse looks like. It's not perfect. I don't really know where it goes through the X and Y axes, right, the intercepts there, but you can put in 0 for X and do all the arithmetic and algebra, and you'll find out exactly where it goes through the X axis and exactly where it goes through the Y axis. So this is just an approximation. I'm going to take off the center now. It's easier to see. All right, so here's our next problem. Find the equation of an ellipse with center at 1, 2. Okay, so if the center is at 1, 2, let's go ahead and see where that is. That's going to be right here. That's my center. The focus at 1, 5. Okay, that's going to be up here. So that's a focus. And it contains the point negative 1, 2. So I know that negative 1, 2 is actually on the ellipse. All right, so now remember, if this is the center and that's a focus, there's got to be a focus right on the other side of that. So if we see that there's 3 spaces to get to that focus, there must be 3 spaces to get to the other focus. Oops, I want to use green because it's not part of the ellipse. So I'll call that focus 2. All right, so if it's 3 spaces away, what does that tell us about C? That tells us that in this case, C is 3 spaces, so C squared is 9. So I know that. I also know my HK because I know the center. So I could start, I know it's going to be x minus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared over something, right, equals 1. All right, so that's, and let's see, my major axis is right here, right? It's along this line, x equals 2, that vertical line. So since my point on the ellipse is exactly left 2 spaces from the center, there should be another one 2 spaces from that center. So those are the endpoints of the minor axis. And that's 2 spaces, right and left from the center. So, and that is in the x direction, right? So in the x direction, we've got our 2 squared, which is 4. So that's this is going to be a vertical ellipse, right? Because the foci are along the vertical axis here. All right, so we still haven't gotten the endpoints of the major axis, which are our vertices. But we know the formula is c squared equals, now I'm going to call this b squared again, since we happen to be looking for that. It's the bigger number, which will be the b squared, minus the smaller number, 4. And we know what c squared is, right? We know it's 9. So 9 equals b squared minus 4. If you add 4 to both sides, you get b squared is 13. And so we replace that b squared with 13. So we have this equation that we figured out. So all that's left to do is finish graphing, and now that we know b, we can figure out approximately where to put another point, 2 points on the ellipse. So the square root of 13, well, square root of 9 is 3, square root of 16 is 4, so it's about 3.5. So it's very close to the foci. So it's about 3.5 right here. And down from the center, 1, 2, 3.5 right here. And then we go ahead and sketch our ellipse. So here's a sketch of the ellipse. Of course, I did not go exactly through probably the x and y intercepts. Of course, this x and y axis isn't even exact. I'd suggest you use real graph paper if you can. And you could answer more questions if you were asked what are the vertices. What would the vertices be? Well, here's one vertex up here. That's over at 1. And this is a little tricky. So let's just write down these vertices. Let's write one of them. So I'd have to go over 1. Now, how high up is that? Well, check it out. From the center, remember we went square root of 13, right? but it was up already 2 spaces plus that square root of 13. So the x value is 1, right? And then what do we do? It was 2 plus square root of 13. So that's kind of hard having to write the vertices. And what about this other vertex down here? Starting from the center point, which means the y value is 2, we subtracted square root of 13. So 2 minus square root of 13. So if you were asked to get the vertices, you should be able to put those down as well. Now the endpoints of the minor axis, those are easy. One was given, this negative 1, 2, and it's pretty easy to see the other one was negative 1, 2. The other one was over here at 3, 2. All right, so again, you're just using as much information as you're given, and from that you should be able to get all sorts of different things, but at least you should be able to write the equation and draw the ellipse. Writing the vertices, that's a harder part, right? The foci, in this case, was given, so no problem there. All right, try these problems all on your own now. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com where you can view all of my videos which are organized by topic.